Let me begin not with a question, but with a disturbance, because history does not knock politely. It slams the door, and in just 78 seconds, somewhere in the Black Sea, a modern Corvette valued at $50 million disappeared beneath the waves, while over 200 Shahed drones were neutralized above open waters. Now, you may see this as a military headline, a tactical incident, maybe even a viral clip, but I want you to see something deeper, something far more telling about the world economy, power, and the illusion of technological supremacy. In just 78 seconds, a modern naval asset valued at $50 million was reduced to wreckage. And that speed is what makes this moment so unsettling for military planners and political decision makers alike. For decades, defense strategy has been built on the belief that scale, cost, and technological complexity create an untouchable advantage, that a higher price tag automatically means higher security. But this incident delivers a sharp contradiction to that logic. It exposes a vulnerability not only in steel and sensors, but in the mindset of institutions that rely on them. If a single, rapidly executed maneuver can neutralize an asset designed to survive multi-layered threats, then what does that say about the real value of such investments? The real shock is not just the destruction itself, but how efficiently it happened, how decisively it shifted the narrative from power projection to power disruption. It forces a difficult question: are modern militaries building deterrence or simply building expensive targets? This is where the danger lies, not in the loss of one vessel, but in the precedent it sets. Because once the myth of invincibility cracks, it doesn't just break equipment, it destabilizes doctrines, budget justifications, and political confidence that have been carefully constructed over decades. Asymmetrical warfare is no longer a side note in modern conflict. It has become the central operating principle, and that is what makes this moment so strategically disruptive. When smaller, resource-constrained forces manage to outperform vastly funded military platforms, it forces a recalibration not only of tactics but of political assumptions. The traditional model of dominance, based on size, budget, and industrial capacity, is being challenged by speed, creativity, and decentralized innovation. That should make policymakers uncomfortable because it suggests that superiority is no longer guaranteed by scale, but by adaptability. The real hook here is this: if power can be neutralized by unpredictability, then even the most advanced military systems become vulnerable to relatively low-cost disruptions. This shifts the battlefield from hardware supremacy to intellectual agility. It also alters geopolitical calculations, where smaller actors can now influence outcomes once reserved for major powers. The imbalance of resources no longer defines the imbalance of impact, and when strategic advantage can be generated through precision, timing, and flexibility rather than mass, it forces global defense planners to reconsider how power is built, maintained, and displayed. That transformation doesn't happen quietly. It unsettles alliances, challenges military doctrines, and creates a new era where influence is increasingly shaped not by how much you spend, but by how intelligently you evolve. What makes this incident economically significant is not just the loss of hardware, but the tremor it sends through the entire defense and political economy. When a single engagement wipes out assets valued at tens of millions, it exposes the fragile logic behind enormous military budgets. Governments justify these expenditures as long-term security investments, but moments like this force a much harder question: how sustainable is a system that produces extremely expensive tools that can be neutralized so quickly? Defense contractors, policymakers, and investors all operate within a framework built on perceived technological superiority. When that perception is shaken, markets don't just react, they reassess. Stock valuations, procurement strategies, and future contracts begin to shift based on new risk calculations. Here's the deeper hook: this isn't just about military losses, it's about financial credibility. If the most advanced systems can be outmaneuvered at a fraction of their cost, then taxpayers and governments start questioning where the money is really going and whether those investments are strategic or simply habitual. That pressure doesn't remain confined to defense sectors. It ripples into political debates, budget negotiations, and public trust, turning a battlefield moment into a broader economic and institutional stress test. What gives this moment its true strategic weight is not only what happened, but how it was meant to be seen. Modern conflict is fought as much in perception as it is in physical space, and this incident functioned as a carefully observed signal to multiple audiences at once: domestic populations, military institutions, foreign governments, and global media. The real leverage comes from the psychological impact. When a dramatic event unfolds at such speed and scale, it reshapes morale, recalibrates confidence, and forces both allies and adversaries to reconsider their assumptions. The hook here is simple but uncomfortable. Power today is measured not only by what you can destroy, but by what you can make the world believe. A single visual sequence of a high-value target being neutralized spreads faster than any official statement, influencing narratives before diplomats even have time to respond. It pressures political leadership, fuels media cycles, and enters public consciousness as a symbol, not just of loss, but of vulnerability. And when symbols shift, strategy follows. This is how political messaging operates in modern warfare, not through speeches alone, but through events designed to communicate strength, resilience, or disruption. In this way, the battlefield becomes a stage, and perception becomes a strategic asset that can influence policy decisions far beyond the immediate zone of conflict. What this moment ultimately exposes is a widening gap between evolving technology and institutional habits tied to older systems. Legacy military platforms, large vessels, high-profile defense hardware, heavily layered systems were designed for a different kind of conflict, one where scale and durability were assumed to intimidate. But emerging technologies don't challenge them head on. They bypass them, confuse them, and economically exhaust them. That's the critical hook. When low-cost, agile systems start outperforming billion-dollar architectures, the entire logic of modernization is called into question. Militaries now face a dilemma: continue upgrading outdated frameworks at enormous cost, or shift toward flexible, decentralized technologies that fundamentally change how force is projected. This transition is not just technical, it's bureaucratic and political. Institutions resist change because change threatens existing power networks, defense contracts, and strategic doctrines built over decades. And yet, each new incident reinforces a hard truth: technology no longer rewards size, it rewards speed of adaptation. The danger is not that traditional systems exist, but that decision makers continue to treat them as untouchable while the battlefield evolves underneath them. This isn't just a technological shift, it's a cultural one inside military planning, and those who fail to recognize it early risk learning the lesson when it's already too late. What this situation ultimately signals is a structural shift in how power is measured and exercised in modern conflicts. For decades, global influence was tied to visible strength: larger fleets, bigger budgets, more advanced arsenals. But that equation is being rewritten, and that is the real disturbance. Today, influence is increasingly determined by who can adapt faster, who can learn quicker, who can respond in real time, rather than who can spend the most. That's the hook most people miss. Speed is becoming a form of power. When a state proves it can neutralize threats through rapid innovation and strategic flexibility, it changes how others calculate risk, deterrence, and escalation. It forces military planners to move away from slow, bureaucratic models toward agile, responsive systems that evolve continuously. This doesn't just transform battlefield dynamics, it reshapes political leverage. Nations that adapt will gain strategic credibility far beyond their size, while those stuck in outdated models begin to lose influence even if their budgets are larger. And in a world where conflicts are broadcast instantly and analyzed globally, this adaptability becomes part of national identity, a signal to allies, adversaries, and investors alike. The future balance of power will not be decided by sheer volume of resources, but by how intelligently and how quickly those resources are transformed into action and strategy. I'll close with this: wars are not only fought with weapons, they are fought with efficiency, narratives, economics, and perception. And what happened in those 78 seconds tells us something very uncomfortable sometimes. It's not the empire that wins, it's the one that learns faster than the empire can spend. Thank you.